So, as some of you are aware, Texas is a death penalty state. And this takes us to a story that occurred over 30 years or nearly 30 years ago, where we have a former suburban Houston police officer who was set to be executed on Tuesday for hiring two people to ride on his estranged wife nearly 30 years ago. Robert Fratta, who's 65 years old, I have his image here in the video, is scheduled to receive a lethal injection for the November 1994 fatal shooting of his wife, Farah, amid a contentious divorce and custody fight for their three children. Now, prosecutors say Fratta organized the murder-for-hire plot in which a middleman, Joseph Prestash, if I pronounce that correctly, hired the shooter, Howard Guidry. Farah Fratta, 33, was shot twice in the head by Guidry in her home's garage in the Houston suburb of Atascosa. So Atascosa is way out there on the outskirts of Houston. I'll try to put something like a map for you so you can see. Now, Robert Fratta, who is a public safety officer for Missouri City, had long claimed he is innocent. Prosecutors said Fratta had repeatedly expressed his desire to see his wife dead and asked several acquaintances if they knew anyone that would kill her, telling a friend, "I'll just kill her. I'll do my time, and when I get out, I'll have my kids." I had a way to think about things. Now, this is according to court records. Now, Prestash and Guidry were also sent to death row for the slaying. Fratta's attorneys have asked the U.S. Supreme Court to halt the execution schedule for Tuesday evening at the state penitentiary in Huntsville. So Huntsville, Texas is where the state penitentiary is. That's north of Houston, far north of Houston, arguing that prosecutors withheld evidence that a trial witness had been hypnotized by investigators. They say that led her to change her initial recollection that she saw two men at the murder scene, as well as a getaway driver. They say, quote, "This would have undermined the state's case, which depend on just two men committing the act and depended, on linking Fratta to both," Fratta's lawyers wrote in their appeal to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court and the lower courts have previously rejected appeals from the accused lawyers that sought to review claims arguing insufficient evidence and faulty jury instructions were used to convict him, right? So just flaws in the system. His attorneys also unsuccessfully argued that one juror in his case was not impartial and that ballistics evidence didn't tie him to a murder weapon. So for those of you in the court of law, a murder weapon is very important to have, and if you want to get a conviction or DNA, etc. So Fratta is one of three Texas death row inmates who has sued to stop the state's prison system from using what they are alleged are expired and unsafe execution drugs. Now, the whole issue with the death penalty is another conversation. Yes, Texas does institute the death penalty, but death penalties going through, they take so long to process, and there are so many appeal processes that you could do things like this and stall the event. Fratta was first sentenced to death in 1996, but his case was overturned by a federal judge who ruled that confessions from his co-conspirators shouldn't have been admitted into evidence. In the same ruling, the judge wrote that, quote, "Trial evidence showed Fratta to be egotistical, misogynistic, and vile, with a callous desire to kill his wife." So once again, relationships. He was retired and resentenced to death back in 2009. So the logic that he's going to take out his wife in order to be with his kids, there's really no justification for that. I wouldn't necessarily go about thinking of things that way. But according to authorities, the execution will be a way for the children to continue to move on with their lives. And at the very least, they won't have to think about him anymore. I think that will play an important part in their healing, he said. Fratta, he said, he being the authorities. Fratta would be the first inmate put to death this year in the state of Texas and the second in the United States. 8 other executions are scheduled in Texas for later this year of 2023. Now, like I said, Texas is a death penalty state. How those get instituted, do they get instituted? That's another conversation. This is the Bayou City Report. I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a backstory that happened about 30 years ago. I'll check in with y'all later. God bless. Peace.